This is a message to all the hasty clickers. Yes, this is not the actual program. This is the review. So you're probably going to stop watching this in a few seconds. Okay, bye to you. Right, but for those people that do stay, the one or two people over about 3 years, Jeff and I are going to review this episode, which Jeff tells me is called The Damage Done.
Yep.
So, do you want to say it? Oh, yes. I'll put the graphic on whilst you tell the audience about this episode.
All right, this was season 4, episode 19, although actually it was the 20th one broadcast, on May 3rd, 1996. And I don't have a full recap of it, but I've got a very brief summary, and then I've got the Morris review where he basically tells what happens in the plot anyway. So on Wikipedia it says Kellerman becomes the primary on a rash of drug-related killings that prove to be part of the turf war between two rival dealers, Drac Fortunato and Luther Mahoney. Each points the finger at the other until a standoff with Drac and a surprise confession convince Kellerman who is responsible for the murders. At a peace vigil attended by the detectives, Drac and Mahoney, the turf war comes to a sudden end when Drac is shot dead. The teleplay was Jorge Zamancona, a story by Henry Brommel and Tom Fontana, and the director was Jace Alexander. And I'm going to have to edit Mr. Morris's review slightly because it's got way too many spoilers in it, so it's going to be a little disjointed, but we'll see what we can do here. He says, Homicide did not generally believe in villains. There were bad people such as Gordon Pratt and Pamela Wilgus who never acknowledged or paid for their crimes, but for the most part, criminals are portrayed as ordinary people. There's no such thing as a Kaiser Soze or Professor Moriarty, no supervillains out there. But sometimes, even in real life, there are people who come close. In David Simon's second series for TV, The Wire, the structure of the show was built around a drug lord who was pretty close to untouchable. The model for these characters is present in The Damage Done, where we meet someone who will eventually, blah, 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 spoilers. None of this, of course, is obvious at first. At first, it seems like a normal case with Kellerman and Lewis investigating a series of drug-related murders that were all committed with the same gun. In many ways, this is Homicide getting back to its roots. With all the serial killers running around, it's been quite some time since we investigated murders that were clearly drug-related. The inner-city turmoil and the devastating and violent effects of drugs was at the core of Simon's book, and for the first time in a long time, we get a cold, unflinching look at the heroin trade in Baltimore. At first, Kellerman feels the burden of being the primary on 6 related murders. This pressure takes an unusual form because Giardello, rather than being aggressive, is instead poetic and almost whimsical, which with G is a clear sign of fury. It is added to by the insinuations of Bayless and Pemberton, who mock Kellerman's problem. The burden becomes clearer when we learn who the opposing sides of the drug war are. At one end is Alonso Fortunato, a.k.a. Drac. Like many kingpins, Drac doesn't even have so much as a parking ticket, but he is different because he is clearly not as bloodthirsty as some of the other crime lords in the city. This leads to the one unbelievable scene in the episode where Drac gets the drop on Kellerman and allows him to live. I know they wouldn't kill off Kellerman, but still. At the other end is Luther Mahoney, an arch-drug lord who uses his drug profits to become a humanitarian. When Kellerman and Lewis meet him, he positively oozes smarminess, but he stands completely unfazed and is even amused by the detective's insinuations. One wonders if the writers named him for DC Comics arch-villain Lex Luthor, an evil man with a similar humanitarian false front. Eric Todd Dellums is marvelous as the unctuous and slimy criminal, and it's small wonder why he was so popular. The killer is eventually caught, but refuses to implicate Mahoney. Kellerman and Lewis know that they will never be able to prove it, and this upsets them. But something that may have bothered him more occurs in the last scene. An anti-drug vigil is held in front of the squad, and Drac shows up with his wife and child. Suddenly, a shot rings out, and Drac is killed, while Mahoney stands just a few feet away. Reed Diamond gives one of his best performances as Kellerman. We see him at his most hardened and also at his most compassionate in True Blue. Part of that compassion comes when he meets Amy Jennings, a woman related to one of the murder victims, and has a flutter in his heart that dies before it could bloom. But his honesty comes through when he tells his partner he has never been tempted to take money found in a drug-related case and would shoot his partner if he tried. This is particularly poignant considering more spoilers. The Damage Done was a critical episode in many ways for the series. It would introduce a villain whose presence would enable the writers to delve deeper into the aspects of drug culture. It showed that even during a standard good guy versus bad guy kind of story could be handled with class, and began cycle of events that would lead to more spoilers. Seen on its own merits, this is a good episode. Seen in relation to Homicide, it is a vital part of the series' history. My score, 8.5. So, that's what Mr. Morris had to say. Ben, what say you?
Well, I like the fact that it's that I like it when I like the idea of like you've got some proper criminals with some brains, and like it's a real battle between the police and organized crime, where it's not just a case of stupid criminals, and banging them up by the end of the episode, which I know that pleases the SJs. And this type of episode wouldn't please the SJs as much. But one of the ways they can go after these, I mean, the easiest way to go after that guy here is just for them to contact the IRS, because the IRS doesn't need a warrant. And like they can just look into this guy. Okay, where'd you get your money from? That's the easiest way to do it. Because they don't need a warrant, do they, Jeff? The IRS.
Well, you say they don't, so I believe you.
Well, then you know they don't.
I don't really know anything about the IRS.
Well, they find out they don't need a warrant to work out where everyone's earnings come from for their taxes. They can audit people. So I just wondered why that didn't become a plot point, because that happens.
Well, maybe it does.
Well, hopefully it does, because then that's more realistic.
Or at least somebody mentions it. You know, what Morris said in that review, about somebody appearing untouchable. Yeah. Obviously, when somebody has that kind of, when Pimbleton made reference to it himself, he said that, the guy was like Teflon, nothing stuck to him. So, that implies that there are obviously a lot of different angles that were tried already. So,
yeah, but it's not.
IRS is not specifically mentioned.
Yeah, but it's, the most famous case of that being the Al Capone being done for tax evasion. But yeah, because the reason I bring this up is I remember this in Campbell Newman in Australia, the Premier of Australia. So the Premier is just effectively the same as the Governor. Because if they use the actual, because the actual Governor is someone who's like the Queen's representative in Queensland. But the same role is by the Premier. Anyway, he would say things like that he introduced a law called the Unexplained Wealth Law, and it was about like trying to go after like these criminals involved in the drugs trade, where it's like they've got a load of wealth, but it doesn't explain where the wealth comes from, and it's an angle to go after them. Anyhow, I've beaten that horse to death, so that gets rubbed out on me whiteboard. So then, I thought that the acting throughout was very good. I thought that the scene between Kellerman and this chick here, it was well acted, mutual attraction acting. Let's go through these grabs. One thing that amused me early on is like they're very neat with the, they're in a rush, but they're just like putting them in there quite neatly. Maybe it's maybe the guy put it in as a bit of an SJ. I don't know. Right, okay. So who's this Kevin Thigpen?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I don't have the cast list pulled up.
Okay.
So
Ingrid Rogers, is she? Any of these names stick out to you?
yeah, Ingrid Rogers is the one that played Amy, the girl you were just referring to.
Right. Okay.
She was much better on this than she was in All My Children.
Right. All My Children. That sounds like a crappy sitcom. Was it a
No,
crappy sitcom?
it's a long-running soap opera.
Oh, right. Okay.
But her character was this spoiled rich girl type, and she was not very convincing.
Yeah.
So she was much better in this as in a more limited role.
Yeah. Maybe it's that she's too nice of a person to play such a horrible.
It's possible. I don't know. I mean, her voice was very much the same, so it's obvious that they kind of try to to cast her in roles where she's, you know, playing somebody that's a little bit more upper crust or whatever, you know. But
yeah. What about
Eric Todd Dellums is Luther Mahoney?
Right. That's
so you will see that name again. Also, interesting bit of biography. His father is Ron Dellums, a longtime U.S. congressman.
Ooh. Right. What about this fellow underneath, Sean Akel Wingate? Is that this fella here?
I don't know. He could have been the first name. I'm not sure. The first guest star that you had on there, so I'm not positive.
Right. So we got this. At least I know how to pronounce this as Jorge. So I've learned something.
Jorge Zamacona.
Right, and then we've got. Yeah, there was an interesting bit where he went around Kellerman. He sort of circled around him, and it made me a little bit dizzy. How did that make you feel, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the intention. They were sort of portraying that this, you know, stress was getting to him. And so if you've ever, you know, felt that way where, you know, like I know I have, where I've been at my desk at work and it seems like that the room is spinning. That was what they were portraying there, I believe. Yes, and now an old school $100 bill, since they changed those in the 2000s.
Oh, right. I thought the guy early on with like the big jaw was going to be like a bigger part of the episode, but it seems that he got bumped off relatively early on.
The guy with the big jaw.
The guy with the big jaw.
And the guy who did the first killing, like right at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, the guy that was right at the start. It was sort of like
the one that Kellerman later said he looks different without a face.
Oh, right. It was sort of like the guy that was sort of like looked like he was in charge in this scene.
Yeah.
And then you saw him like passing on drugs to people.
Well, yeah, well, that was kind of the point, I guess, is that they sort of, you know, they show him and he's like the high roller guy, and then he gets knocked off, so it's showing you that no one's safe.
But so who was that guy at the beginning? In terms of like the way he fits into the organized crime.
Well, I mean, what is implied at the end of the episode is, of course, that, you know, they were looking at Drac, but that his contention was it was Mahoney all along, basically bumping off his own people to try to make it look like Drac was the one doing it.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what's implied, is that guy was an enforcer for Mahoney, he was taking out Drac's people, but then he was killed by one of Mahoney's own people to continue that, basically. So it was like Mahoney saying, there's nobody that's safe. You know, he was saying, like, you know, basically, you know, anybody can be taken out. I don't have any fear of getting rid of anybody if it suits my purposes. So
that's not how they do it in the mafia. They're a bit more loyal to their employees, I suppose.
Well, I guess what they're portraying here is that the this particular way the drug business was being run in Baltimore was not quite with as much loyalty.
Yeah, because it's like if
Because
you get
Drac is portrayed as loyal because he, at least if you believe what he said, he tried to warn them. That's why they said when the witness said he went in there, that's why he was there. He told them, they're coming for you to get out.
Yeah, initially they had this scene where they had this woman come in, and she was. I had to like rewind it a couple of times to make sure it wasn't the same woman, because like they had her come in, and then they showed this woman being zipped up in a bag, and I initially wondered if it was her, but then it was a different woman,
right?
Because that one was blonde, and then the other one had browner hair. There's that jump cut between it. I mean, he probably didn't think he'd get caught, but I'm just thinking, like, if that ever got out, though, that he would, like, bump off his own guys, then people wouldn't want to work for him.
Yeah, well, that's obviously the idea was that he was trying to make it look like it was Drac. So it wouldn't come back to him. He could tell his people that Drac killed him.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was just... These things have a habit of going wrong. But anyway, he's probably an artisan and doesn't think of the negative consequences as much. Right, so there's probably some people up here who have been in previous cases, like Buckus. Was that an episode that we saw? If we think of the ones that we've seen.
It might have been. These would have been all from 96, so that was... This picture doesn't show Bayless's. Of course, 96 started with all the sniper victims, so that's where all of his first ones were. But this doesn't show Bayless on it.
Oh, I remember here, Nitsky for Pendleton.
Yeah.
That's the only name that sticks out for me. And Jeff might be thinking, well, Ben, if you got through these quicker, you'd have a better memory.
That's true. If you look under Munches, you see Rudzinski. That was, the two-part one called Justice about the cop who was shot.
Let's see if I can get it. Yep.
Whose son killed his killer.
Yeah, with the Derringer and Kellerman faked out him with the ballistics, making him think that they'd kept the bullet.
Yeah, so
they get rid of him after 2 years.
Across from Rudzinski on Kellerman's, you have Damon. That was the guy that the son killed, the one that shot the father.
Right.
So right there on the board, you have Damon, the killer of Rudzinski, who was then killed himself.
On the DVD, is there like a little thing where, if you like, you can like highlight one of these names and it will go to that episode?
No, although that would be a good idea.
For those people who'd like a picture of it all, you could like just go up, like select the one, see how the link, see if there are any links. So I thought this actor was... Now, I've heard in the past that that maybe the revolvers are a lot more reliable than those magazine-type guns, the one that Kellerman was using, because they do not jam as often.
Well, at least in early 90s, NYPD agreed with you, because if you look at NYPD Blue, they have revolvers.
Yeah.
Whereas Baltimore was using Glocks.
Yeah, because otherwise, people wouldn't use revolvers because you can only get 6 bullets in a revolver, whereas with the magazine you can get a few more in, maybe even 12. But I suppose a revolver is harder to conceal going to be a bit fatter.
Yeah.
Now, I've got to say, Haley would be disgusted by his technique. because he wasn't doing any kind of slow eccentrics. You're supposed to do you're supposed to do it up quick, but it's like the lowering is supposed to have taken 3 seconds lowering it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that guy just went straight up and down.
I mean, I would say that, yeah, it is, by now, most people would say it's more effective to bring it down slower, but I would say it's not unrealistic in the sense that a lot of people have done it that way over the years.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, plus the actor looks like he's worked out a bit.
Yeah.
So
it's not, it's not it's true to Kellerman in that, he's stressed out lifting weights and everything. He may not necessarily be thinking about proper form, or he's not necessarily thinking about muscle atrophy. He's thinking about just pumping as fast as he can.
Yeah. Ponytail on that guy. Another reason not to like him. Now, Jeff, is this kind of any reference to any actual team in Baltimore? This?
Well, I'm sure it is, because every location used is a real place in Baltimore. So that is a real school of some sort. I don't know which one.
Mm. And then we got the... I liked the fact that was good writing, the fact that he would be really pissed off because he knew that Kellerman took a shot at him. It's just that the gun failed.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that scene.
Keep me smiling, Kellerman. My favorite line in this episode was when G went through his thing about the seasons, and Lewis goes, "Damn, I ain't never seen him that pissed off."
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, yes, because you've got Matthias C, Matthias M, Matthias Y. So, would two of those be the parents of the girl?
Right. And then the other one's their son.
Right.
Because remember, the girl didn't get killed because she was hiding in the closet.
Right. Oh, yeah, and this is Drac. It looks a little bit like Eddie Murphy. Little bit. I don't know whether you...
I think he looks more like Townsend. Is it Robert Townsend?
I know.
The actor that was in some movies.
I know who. How about Michael Irvin?
Maybe a little.
Yeah. Right. Peace in Our Streets. So that was a good ending, because to me it's like, right, this is a proper contest between the police and an organised crime. And it sets things up to, and I was thinking at the time, I would like it to be more half and half, where half the time the criminals get away with it.
Well, I'm not sure what the exact percentage is, but the way it's portrayed, of course, is they sort of... Homicide was different in some cop shows where the sort of the show would try to get across that most criminals get caught, even if, every once in a while somebody gets away. Or if they do, it's a technicality or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas Homicide often made it seem more bleak, especially when it came to drug crimes, that it was sort of hopeless, that even if they arrested somebody, that that somebody else just took his place anyway, so it didn't really make any difference.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe not half, but if you were running it, Jeff, how many unsuccessful closes, I suppose we'd call it?
I mean, I don't know.
Would you do? How many
percentage?
How many would you do if you were doing it?
I don't know. I can't say for sure. I think because I'm more about telling a good story than some kind of exact statistics. So I think obviously they had network pressure that was changing some of the ways they did things. I would have liked to have kept it more like the show started, where we had multiple cases within one episode going on with the different detectives. So, for instance, this episode and the one before it, there's barely any Munch at all. Like I wouldn't have gone 2 episodes not having him at all. I would have had, at least a brief discussion of some other case he was working on or something like that.
Any of these names stick out?
Nope, not particularly.
Right. I don't think I've got anything else to say about this episode. I think to me that you could find some faults with this episode. Was that correct?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you want to give your rating first, and then I'll give my brief comments.
I get about for Homicide, because remember, I'm not a huge fan of like crime dramas. I suppose my favorite would be Columbo. But on the scale of like Homicide because I think I have given like a 9 before for other episodes, so going by that. What I'm sort of saying, folks, is that a 7 or an 8 for Homicide is not the same as a 7 or an 8 for Red Dwarf, or a 7 and 8 for Only Fools and Horses.
See, for me, it is. I mean, I try to rate everything the same in terms of it's my overall enjoyment level that I go for, as opposed to any kind of sliding scale.
Yeah, but for me, it's like I wouldn't give like an 8 or a 7 to an episode that I wouldn't watch, independent of like doing these reviews. That's what I sort of mean.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like because there are certain programs where it's like okay, it's good, but I could do something else instead of watching it. That's sort of like how I approach a show. That a show has to be really good in order to for me to want to watch it instead of doing something else.
Well, yeah, I mean that makes sense.
I mean, whereas in the past, when, like say 20 years ago, where there were fewer options in, like, say, an evening, where you'd not got as much stuff as you could have done on the internet.
Oh yeah, now, I mean, like my trips to my grandmother's in San Antonio when I was a kid, where, pretty much the choice was, reading books or watching TV.
Yeah.
And so in the TV, there wasn't cable or anything, so it was just a few channels.
Yep. Whereas now, the new programs are in competition with the old programs. like this program that you're watching is in competition with like programs that you're not watching at the moment because you're watching Homicide or something else.
Well, right. For me, there's no contest. The old programs win every time.
Yeah.
Other than live sports events are the only current things I really watch.
Yeah, and you still watch the old sports events.
Yeah, I do.
Even when you know what the result is.
Uh-huh.
Right. So I think that for Homicide, and the way I like the way it ended and the way it set things up, that there wasn't a lot of Munch in it. I think I'll give it about an 8. I think.
All right.
I think I'll give it about an 8.
Sort of like with the Morris review, I have to separate kind of, my looking at the episode as a single episode versus its sort of place in Homicide history or whatever, because I know what's to come, and thus I can say in retrospect, I think that they do a pretty good job of introducing some elements that would be called back to later on. I thought there were a couple of scenes that dragged a little bit to me. Kellerman's scene with the girl in the weight room, and also the scene with Drac and Kellerman was a little bit kind of forced to me. It sort of seemed like they were trying to be a little preachy or kind of have the character sort of lecture Kellerman on something, you know. And even the episode as a whole, it doesn't surprise me for the time to have a show that has a very strong anti-drug message in a sense. And of course, the Homicide itself had already had episodes where they had Munch trying to make the case for, you know, legalizing drugs and things like that. So it's not that they hadn't kind of covered both sides of things, but it still seemed like there was a little bit maybe of a lack of realism in terms of the way that they talked about that they sort of had all drugs on the equal footing. And it's Lewis is sort of the only one who points out, you know, hey, if you take aspirin, you're taking drugs, and you know, so maybe ease up on the sort of moral superiority that Kellerman seems to be displaying when he talks about that.
They did mention with Pemberton with like addicted to cigarettes, yeah, but would you kill someone?
Yeah, that was
a packet, and it said maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, Pemberton's best part actually was that where he's like, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Kill somebody for a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah, and in fact, that was the funniest moment in the episode, wouldn't I?
Yeah. So that was, even in an episode that didn't feature a lot of Pemberton, he still got a good moment there. In fact, there was the one moment for Bayless where he was on, you know, he was getting on Kellerman about stuff where, when I was watching it with Morgan, I was thinking at that point Kellerman should have just backhanded Bayless. Like, get out of my face.
Yeah, it was like
it was almost an opportunity where Bayless, you know, he, like they mentioned in a previous episode, you know, Bayless was the rookie for 4 years, and now Kellerman is like, so Kellerman's like the only one Bayless can really pick on at all because he's the only guy that's newer. So
yeah.
He's sort of
yeah. I mean, if I was like script editor, there's certain bits like that where I'd say this can be funnier, guys. There can be better dialogue here, better banter between.
Yeah, well, you know, in the very first episode of Homicide, we got the scene where Bayless is kind of getting in Pemberton's face, and Pemberton, you know, comes right back at him and says, you know, stay out of my face, you know, and I would have liked to have seen Kellerman have a stronger reaction to Bayless like that in that scene. You know, but anyway, so yeah, I can kind of pick at things, but you know, that I find as flaws, but you know, still an enjoyable episode, and it's a little bit of a feeling like, you know, like I said, there's no Munch, and Howard is kind of shoehorned in, like, you know, it's sort of like, oh,
yeah,
she needs to have some lines, so we'll stick her in there.
Yeah, yeah.
So there were certain things where it seemed like they weren't quite sure how to write everybody.
It was a little bit like you've got a shoe in an episode in Star Trek Voyager, where got to shoehorn Jerry Ryan in, get him in one scene, and then put a feature in the trailer.
Yeah, but I really liked the interplay between Lewis and Kellerman and G.
Yeah,
all of that I thought was really well done. I like it when they portray G as, you know, it sounds funny to say as he is, but it's sort of like, you know, he has these different sort of methods of motivating people, but he's very bottom line at the core. He's like, turn the red to black. Just do it, you know, whatever way you got to do it.
Yeah, isn't black beautiful?
Yeah, so he's not as concerned about all of these internal struggles that Kellerman may or may not be having. It's just it's a bottom line thing for him. You know, these are the cases to solve, get them solved, and anything else is not really our job.
I mean, again, as a script editor they're looking at all of G's lines, I would say there's a little bit of repetition in there. I would like an anecdote from him, like an old little bit of an SJ, a callback to some.
Yeah, I guess there wasn't quite time for that in this episode. He's had plenty in the past. He'll have some more again. So we were spared a little bit of that this time. But the next episode will definitely feature some G moments. I'll just say that without spoiling it too much.
So I would say about this episode that there are moments of padding in it.
Yeah. A little bit, yeah.
Really?
So, I would overall give it a 7 out of 10 because it's enjoyable, but I know Homicide can do better and has and will. So, yeah.
Right. I mean, to me, it's moments of padding in there, and obviously like setting things up for the future. And again, I still think that the dialogue was a little bit better in the first season.
Yeah, that's probably true. And as I said before, I think you may disagree with me, but I think there's a little bit of a resurgence in that coming up soon because when David Simon started to write more episodes, you got a little bit more of the cop dialogue, a little truer to it, I think. Henry Bromwell's writing was sometimes amusing, but not necessarily quite as realistic. So, anyway, having said that, of course, the next episode that we get to is one written by Henry Bromwell. But so that's what I don't know for sure whether you'll like. The next one is called The Wedding, and I think overall you probably enjoy it because you like more comedic episodes. And it is one, but it also has some dark stuff in it too. So I'm not sure how you'll come out on that, but we'll see.
Well, by comedic episodes, I mean I tend to like more. Not if it's like. I don't like comedic episodes that are silly. Where it's.
Well, there is a little bit of silliness, but it's still done in a realistic way overall.
Yeah.
So and it definitely this next one will incorporate all the characters. There won't be anybody left out in this one because they'll all have something to do.
I mean, because me looking at, if I was a script editor, I'd think, okay, like the characters that can be really funny, Pembleton and Lewis, and we've got to keep the bar high there, folks. These can have some really good stuff for those two characters because there's a particular sense of humor that they both have, character-based humor that you can really and the same with Munch as well. So those three, there's a vein of character humor that can come through for those three where you'd look at it on a page and you go, right, that's Pembleton, that's Munch, that's Lewis.
Yeah. Well, I thought Lewis had some good lines in this episode. Yeah. And
oh yeah, but you know what I mean. Like the other characters aren't as fun. The dialogue, you can say a little bit, but it's like I want dialogue to be like characteristic of the characters. You know what I mean? So it's like if you just look at a paragraph and say, "Oh, that sounds like that particular character," and you do get that with Lewis, Pembleton, and Munch. So that's pretty good for a show to have three distinct characters that are funny in their own ways, and it's not like forced comedy. It's comedy which is character based. Which I agree. I agree with the idea that character based comedy is the best comedy.
Yeah, and I think I would extend that and say that in the first few seasons. You even had more like that because you had Corsetti, who was provided some of that as well, and then also Felton and Bolander did some.
Yeah, especially in like the first episode, the way that I liked how Felton could always needle Pembleton, and there were like equals there.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff was pretty much right out of the book. The interplay between Felton and Pembleton, and some of the stuff they said about each other.
Yeah, so I mean, the actor that plays Kellerman is good, but it's like trying to find a voice for him.
Yeah, he will have a lot of ups and downs in his time on the show, and there's some moments where I think they really do a great job of capturing that ESTP spirit, and it comes through very much in what he's doing, and other times where he's used a little bit more as a plot device, and it isn't as interesting.
Yeah.
which is why it was so fun watching it with Morgan, because there were moments where I could tell, you know, there were moments he really related to Kellerman, and other moments where he still did, but he was really frustrated by him.
Yeah.
So or frustrated by him, or frustrated by the way they wrote the character.
Yeah, that's it. It's I think
there would be moments where he, like, you know, he was disappointed in you know, they made him too scrubbish, in his words, you know.
Yeah.
In some ways.
I think Felton was better written.
Yeah, overall I would agree. I think the only the weakness in the Felton writing was when usually in the stuff about his personal life.
Yeah,
it got a little bit too, which he said at the time too. He said that he thought it was a little too Hollywood, was his way of putting it, you know. But yeah.
Did any of the actors and actresses have any input into their dialogue apart from Munch?
You know, I think somewhat. I don't know exactly how much, but it depended on the director. I'm sure that, you know, some directors are a lot more prone to have a problem with ad-libbing, and other ones are much more willing to go along with it. So
I remember something from an interview with Yaphet Kotto where he said, I think one of his uncles was a detective.
All right.
Because, yeah, and he was also, folks, played a good villain in a James Bond movie with Roger Moore in the 70s. I've forgotten what it's called. But it's the one with the crocodiles and the voodoo. That's a good one. Right. So I can hear Jeff getting a bit restless, so it's probably time to end.
All right. Well, join us next time, everybody, for the wedding. Hopefully it won't take a month this time before we do that.
All right. Okay. Bye, folks.
Bye.